Welcome back once again, and as we all know, following up over the different courses of events and the military confrontation between the U.S. and Iran, and after signing a memorandum of understanding earlier last month, at the end of last month in Evian, between the two parts, and the whole world started looking positively towards a whole economic perspective, a positive one, and towards sorting out of the problem of the Strait of Hormuz and a lot of other issues. Again, there was a retaliation of strikes that was started by the United States, and a violation of this agreement by striking Iran once again, and a retaliation by Iran. And to follow up over the situation and where is that scenario going to take the whole world once again, we're very delighted to be having with us here live in the studio Dr. Mohamad Hashim, Professor of Mass Comm and a media expert. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on your show.
We're going to go to a quick report first, and we'll come back to you with Dr. Hashim, so stay with us.
Iran insisted on Saturday it had kept its word on a ceasefire with the U.S. after U.S. President Donald Trump insisted the truce was over, but that he had agreed to further negotiations with the Republic. The comments mark a new law in relations between the two sides after an exchange of fire this week rocked a shaky agreement aimed at turning the months-long ceasefire into durable peace and threatened a return to full-scale regional war. Trump ramped up the rhetoric between the warring sides on Saturday, threatening in a Truth Social post to completely disseminate Iran if it attempted or succeeded in assassinating him. It came a day after the president agreed to further negotiations with Iran, even as he repeated his assertion that the ceasefire was over just weeks after Washington and Tehran signed a memo of understanding pushing for peace. While there have been no direct talks between Iran and the U.S. since last month, Iranian media reported that a delegation from mediator Qatar was in Tehran after the sides exchanged strikes. Earlier this week, at a NATO summit, Trump also declared the ceasefire over, saying of Tehran, it's just a waste of time dealing with them.
Welcome back once again. Very delighted to have you with us here in the studio, Dr. Mohamad Hashim, Professor of Mass Comm and a media expert. Good morning, Dr. Hashim.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on your amazing morning show.
It's a real pleasure to have you today. Let us first look over the situation there that have started months back, that steaming situation between the U.S. and Iran. Now the U.S. have started striking Iran again, and Iran retaliated. The scenario is repeated for multiple times. This time, the repetition of this scenario is holding a lot of red signals, especially that there was a memorandum of understanding, especially that it is supposed to be a continuation of over the course of executing the conditions, almost 14 conditions for this agreement to be executed. I mean, moving towards a positive way.
Yes.
How do you read the change of heart by the United States, or let us call it a change of the scenario?
Yes. Well, it's definitely undermining confidence of public opinion. People are confused about what's going on. Apparently, according to American media, the Iranian forces attacked some of the ships of the Strait of Hormuz during and after, just after the funeral, the 3 or 4 day funeral of Khamenei, and America apparently was waiting for the funeral to finish. They're saying they weren't expecting any attacks on any of the ships. Iran said they're attacking the ships for their own agenda, their own reasons. So that began. There was a U.S. strike after that, and then Iran retaliated by hitting a few of the Gulf countries again. So it's definitely a confusing time again. It definitely breaks the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, and it's changed the landscape again. But since the retaliation from Iran, nothing has happened since.
Right. One of the most important cores of this particular story and the memorandum of understanding that was signed is those conditions, and there were very important points that were included inside this agreement that the United States have always been repeating it, which is denuclearizing Iran completely from any nuclear activation, and on top of all nuclear arms, and the stopping entirely of the continuation or activation of Iran's nuclear plants, which was not really welcomed by Iran, and also the Strait of Hormuz to be controlled. The controlling of the Strait of Hormuz also was an issue. Yes. There were other issues that were taken. From your own point of view, assessing this agreement, what were the most important conditions that might stand in the way before both parts?
Well, it's not an isolated issue. I think the attempts to say that Iran has nuclear weapons or is making nuclear weapons or developing nuclear weapons has been refuted a few times. I think there's been a fatwa by the leader that they're not going to have nuclear weapons. That's already been sort of refuted. I definitely think it's all about the Strait of Hormuz, and the agenda behind that we're not sure. We're not sure why. What is so special about the Strait of Hormuz for the United States? So we're not sure why that's happening. But obviously they want the strait to be working properly and efficiently, and for international ships like French ships and other European ships to be passing through. I think that's very important for the United States. But obviously Iran is not bending over. They're not giving in, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. From your own point of view, what were the reservations on the Iranian part that could never be resolved?
I think there might be a financial...
the frozen assets, of course.
Yeah. Also,
and that was not also agreed on by the American side.
Yes, and also there's the new project that's leading to the 2030 vision for Saudi Arabia, the IMEC, the Indian Mediterranean Corridor. And that has a big part, in my opinion, to do with the Strait of Hormuz. So that is a new alternative transport route for the region, from India all the way to the Strait of Hormuz, basically. And I personally think that the Iranians want their share of this major project, because the major project includes the United States, includes Saudi, Dubai, all the GCC countries, and I think Iran wants a part of that.
Was that mentioned openly? Was that discussed openly during the discussions? And
not recently, no, but they have discussed it before, yes.
So that might come in the way?
Yes.
Right. Because every time we hear statements from an Iranian official, we hear that they're not going to give up that easily. They want peace, but not on their expense,
yes,
according to their own statements,
yes,
of course. But then talking about the real chances of peace, with the advent of new elections in the United States, and probably the American administration would think of some easing down on its decisions, and also the Congress, the issue of allowing more budget for this particular story, the U.S. and Iran and all that. How do you see the direction? Where is the U.S. administration under the leadership of President Trump directing itself in the coming months?
Well, if you look at broader diplomatic engagement between how does America, the United States, communicate with Iran? Do they communicate technically directly with Iran, or do they use intermediaries like Oman and Qatar? And they used also Pakistan a few months ago. So the strategy of the United States is quite clear, I think. What they want is to take over the strait or have more control over it. So that's a big part of the policy. Whether Congress and the people of the United States agree or not, that's debatable. But at the beginning of the war, definitely Congress was against this war. A lot of votes were against the war. But they haven't done a poll since. I think people have sort of forgotten about the war. It's been a while since the war's been on. The World Cup's just been on. So there's been a few other distractions that have taken people away from the concept of war. But I think that it's starting again. It looks like it's starting again. It might bring up more public opinion. So, you know, the elections in November, I think that the next couple of months will let us know how the public perceive what Trump's done in the last few years that he's taken office again. He did things locally like he's trying to get rid of the woke movement. Now the woke movement in America is, you know, the whole thing about diversity and multiculturalism and all that. He's trying to get rid of that, leaning towards a more right government. So the Republicans in America have moved away from the Democratic policies. The Republican policies are more right-wing, so right-wing is more conservative against a lot of the woke movement that has been taking place over the last 10 years. So that's a big thing that he did. The first thing that he did when he took office, he eliminated and he had executive orders to cancel a lot of these old woke policies. One by one, he was in his office eliminating a lot of these woke movements and democratic policies that have been in place in the Biden administration. So there was that going on, and obviously the end of the war of Gaza, and then what's happening in Iran. So is the public happy? Well, soon to find out.
Right, but then again, observing the whole image or the scene between the United States and Iran, political observers have just taken some points observing all those the months taken between in retaliation and striking and violation and agreements, and with also the intervention of the mediators also at the same time. But the question that might rise now or raise itself, who is the real beneficiary of the extension of this war and the violation? Because probably the United States isn't just randomly taking actions. There must be a theory, there must be some reasons, there must be a plan somehow, a political or an economic plan. But the real question now that is crossing everybody's mind, who could be the real beneficiary out of the extension of this war and the expansion of this war between the U.S. and Iran?
Well, again, it doesn't seem like anyone's really benefiting. The world is suffering. Insurance companies are suffering. The price of rising oil, the world is suffering. The prices of fuel and food. Crude oil that the Chinese were purchasing 96% from Iran, which manufactures things like fertilizer and other important things, is also suffering.
All the chains, all the supply chains.
Yeah, all that suffering. Movement of transport suffering. Prices of airline are suffering. So there's a lot of things that are suffering. Who's gaining? I mean, Pakistan made a little bit of money because they were using their port over the last few months more than the Strait of Hormuz. Stock market keeps going up and down depending on what Trump tweets. So sometimes he tweets something and all of a sudden the next day the stock market crashes, and then 2 days later it comes back. So there are people winning in this war, but it's not a lot of people.
Right, but since there was the Strait of Hormuz wasn't the reason for that disrupted relationship between the U.S. and Iran. Do you think that once sorting out the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, there could be some serious hope that this war could end?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz was a consequence of what happened, but initially the war began by, I think, Israel convincing America or America convincing it, one or the other, to attack Iran. And no one knows the real reason. I mean, we talk about nuclear. Well, they don't have nuclear. We talk about, you know, change of regime. The regime hasn't changed, even though a lot of the Iranian people living in the United States and in other countries want the regime to collapse, because they're saying it's not a good regime. Has that happened? That hasn't happened. Trump said he will help with that. He hasn't done anything about that, so only time will tell.
There were even slogans chanting against the United States during the funeral, laying the Ali Khamenei to rest by the people, the Iranian people, against the United States. But then going back again to the idea of always violating the agreements and expansion and extension of this war with no benefit to anyone else, what are the most grave implications on the Strait of Hormuz in the sense of the energy prices, the food supply and energy supply chains, and the economies of other countries, especially with the winter that is coming for Europe and the West? and there would be a repeated energy crisis like the one that happened as a result of the Ukrainian-Russian war.
Yes.
There is going to be a possible energy crisis in Europe because of the Strait of Hormuz. So how do you assess this particular possible danger coming up for the winter season?
Well, like I said, the strange thing about this, everyone's forgotten about the war. So everyone's been focusing about other things over the last few months, and for it to come back, thinking about strategies for the winter hasn't popped up yet. Nobody's thinking what they're going to be doing in the next few months. But obviously, the next couple of weeks, people have to start thinking again that they need to get reserves for their energy, reserves for their oil. I mean, in Australia, when the war began, Australia began rationing petrol and oil from Vietnam and other places straight away. No one talks about that anymore. In America, the prices went up, and everyone's forgotten about all that stuff. But we're going to have to think about it all again. What's happening with the maritime control of all the ships, that's a huge problem. If you stop the ships, things get more expensive, and it reflects on the consumer later on.
Right. That would also take us to something that is really, could be relevant, but it's one of the foresight of the Egyptian administration, that working real hard on developing with our nuclear safe energy and inaugurating the nuclear reactor, the facility in Dab'a power plant earlier, 2 days ago. It's a Russian-Egyptian collaboration project, huge project, and expected, inshallah, the third and the fourth at the same time. How do you assess that particular step taken by the Egyptian government? Of course, that wasn't an overnight project. It was years back, but worked and initiated by President Abdel Fattah Sisi and the Russian government. How do you assess this step taken and initiated by the president?
Yes, well, Egypt's always wanted peace in the region because Egypt's got a clear vision of building and development, digitization. There's a lot of things happening in Egypt. The new monorail that was inaugurated a few months ago, the speed cameras, the radar cameras that companies like Arcorp are doing, which is a part of the Interior Ministry. There are so many good things happening in Egypt at the moment, and Egypt tries its hardest to be a mediator also in some of these affairs because it's focused on its own development and projects. The Octagon that was inaugurated also last week or the week before.
Right.
So it's non-stop development in the region, and when Egypt has to get involved to be a mediator between these nations, it does. It's helped countries like in the GCC, and now the new project of Russia is obviously another great project between the two nations. They've got a long history of development together. So it's just another thing to look forward to.
Of course. But then the reason why we raised this issue of inauguration of that reactor at the Dab'a power plant is because as a result, one of the the most important results or impact out of this huge project is that Egypt is going to export energy also to other countries. There is going to be a boom in the energy investment when it comes to, especially at a time where there's an energy crisis inside the region.
Shortage, yeah.
And surely it is going to save us a lot of hassle trying to avoid the expected crisis in winter. But then going back to the global energy, that cannot be avoided because this is the law of physics. If there is a war on a waterfront, that a passage to all those ships carrying, that energy supply chains, there definitely is going to be a crisis. How do you expect the global energy market to look like if this situation is expanding or doesn't come to an end?
Well, it's going to put a lot of strain again on insurance companies, because how insurance companies work is that you pay the insurance company to give you what's missing. So if there's like a natural disaster, or factories get burnt, or things are not working, the insurance company is liable to pay back and fix what's happening. So when you have shortages of fuel and other infrastructure, they're going to rely on insurance companies. They're going to say, well, we've paid so and such million dollars over the last 5 years. We want recompense, we want compensation for that. So there's going to be a big strain on international insurance companies. There's going to be a big strain, obviously, on how the smaller companies deal with the petrol prices in the world. And obviously things like fertilizer are very important too. The companies and the factories that import the fertilizers, manufacture the fertilizers, distribute the fertilizer, they're also going to have strain on them. So there's going to be a lot of strain on these companies, these infrastructures, but there will be opportunities for people to also make money, as there always is when there's a war. There's always opportunity to make someone to benefit from that war. So there'll be new companies coming up. There'll be new ways of dealing with the situation. There'll be people benefiting from some of these shortages in other ways.
Right. But from your own point of view, who's going to be suffering most? Is it going to be the citizens in countries, especially
yes, it's always the citizens that suffer, yes. And obviously companies.
That would divert us to, there is always an exit out of any conflict. That would divert people to probably new policies.
Yes.
And probably new ways out. What could be this way for probably people, especially at energy crisis? Like Egypt is a good example right now. We're already going through a positive direction that could comply with the upcoming, if there is a possible upcoming crisis.
Yes.
So what could be the scenarios?
Well, in these situations, things like electric cars are used, more electric charging stations are created, like that happened in Egypt and other countries. Different forms of transport, green sectors start, waking up, like riding bikes and stuff like that happen. So there's many alternatives to the oil crisis, and some countries in the West are ready for that. They already have all these climate change and sustainability procedures in line already. And Egypt also. Egypt has a lot of that ready for its citizens.
True.
But I think Egypt is in a good state. They're not really feeling the impact of what's happening. And it's kept its citizens, under control and happy, in a way. Yes.
That is very much true. But then going back to the striking and then going to the negotiating table with the mediators also. You are a media expert, and on top of all, you are a professor of mass comm. Assessing according to the smart media analysis, do you think that the two parts could possibly reach a serious end out of this, or and this is only a maneuver, the striking of the US and the retaliation of Iran, or what could it really be? What were the most impressive media headlines assessing the final situation?
Well, the media, again, is confused. So Trump's coming out there swearing at Iran, tweeting bad things, saying, there's a couple of words that he used that I probably can't mention on this television station, but he said they're not good people, they're dishonest, they lied, they didn't keep their promise, and he's going to attack again. And the fact that he respected the funeral, that he was waiting for the funeral proceedings to be over, and now that they attacked, he's going to, and he talks in the rhetoric and the language of the common man of America, and the common man of America loves that cowboy attitude. They love that, the swearing and all that stuff. So, the media is laughing at the moment of what he's saying. And again, nobody's going to take it seriously until we find out what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. When countries like Dubai get impacted again, GCC countries, Saudi Arabia, that's perhaps when we're going to hear and see more headlines in the media to really see what's going on.
A final question now. When do you think it's the real time for the United States to end this war? And does it have any relation, that decision, with Israel?
I'm not sure. I have no idea. But I think they do want to end it because they're getting a lot of pressure from the GCC countries that were attacked, the military bases, the US military bases that were attacked in the GCC countries. They're getting a lot of pressure from the GCC countries asking America, why are you allowing this to happen when we've already given you so much money? And the GCC countries can go somewhere else. They can say to America, we're not going to get you as our security anymore, we can go somewhere else. And America doesn't want that. So that might be a good reason for America to end the war.
At that note, we'll have to end it here.
End the program.
Of course, Dr. Mohamad Hashim, Professor of Mass Comm and a media expert, thank you very much for coming over and giving us, as usual, your valuable input to the Good Morning